Welcome, Happy New Year. Welcome to our first workshop of the year. I know there's other things on folks' personal agendas this afternoon, so let's go ahead and get started. Mr. Administrator, item number 1, House Bill 735.
House Bill 735, there's been a lot of questions regarding what that impact is and the steps that we're taking to try to comply with that new legislation. So I'm going to ask Michelle Krikovic to come up. She's the Director of Contractor Licensing. But while she's coming up, I also wanted to announce that we have made some operational changes and improvements. So we're combining contractor licensing over with BDRS. And so Michelle's serving a dual role. She's going to continue in her role as Director of Contractor Licensing, but she's also going to be the Deputy Director of BDRS, which really goes to, if you know her background was in process improvement. And so it fits very well with some of the operational changes that we're looking at fresh eyes in the way we do permitting and the way things flow. If you also remember back, we have outsourced the inspection function of contractor licensing over to
Code enforcement.
Our code enforcement group, trying to gain efficiencies in our field staff versus in-house, because we had 4 people there, but they're running all over the county. And if we combine that with people that are already out in the field, then it allows us for greater efficiency in the way we actually do the work, trying to reduce windshield time and gain efficiency by coverage areas. So there's several operational improvements that we're looking forward to, and we're happy to have Michelle, helping us out with those. But she's here today to talk specifically about House Bill 735, and I'm going to ask her to outline the steps that we're taking to try to comply, and some of the difficulties in doing so. So go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you, Barry. And good morning, everyone. I thought probably the first place to start is really to let you know, remind you, or introduce you to what the Contractor Licensing Department is and does. As a department, we oversee the licensing administration, records management, and investigations of the Pinellas County Construction Licensing Board. So what we do is we license contractors to ensure that those who are working in the trade have the skills to be able to perform the work. We monitor their insurance to ensure that both homeowners, citizens are protected when they hire a contractor, but also that workers are protected when they're on the job. We also enforce the Florida and county statutes and ordinances specifically related to unlicensed contracting, as well as also arbitrating building code disputes, amending building codes, and protecting the coastal construction control line. So there is a governance aspect to what we do. Ultimately, we enforce construction licensing law. We are a county-wide authority, and we have been protecting citizens in Pinellas County since 1973. That's when the PCCLB was originally created. And as I have been able to dive in deeper to our business, I have learned from some of our old timers, including second and sometimes third generation contractors in Pinellas County, that what inspired the contractor licensing to the PCCLB way back in 1973 was that Pinellas County was going through a time of great development. Now we are in a time of great redevelopment, but in 1973 we were very attractive for all contractors who were coming in, some who did not have the skills to deliver the work, some who were bad actors who took the money, ran off, didn't finish the work, and some citizens who were harmed. So I think one of the things to take away from this is that we are a professional licensing board. We're responsible for maintaining standards and ensuring that contractors live up to those standards, and then sanctioning them if they don't meet those standards. We're now entering our 50th year. So licensing in Pinellas County is not something that's new. We currently have 18 specialty license classifications. There are 41 classifications that are dictated by the state and 18 local specialties. Among those 18 specialties are approximately 1,400 licensed contractors who are in a variety of locally dictated trades. And each of them, every contractor who comes to us for licensing, has to go through a rigorous process to get their license. They have to have the prerequisite construction experience. It must be verified. And in a case of some specialties, it can be as little as 1 year of experience. In other specialties, like a plumber, that requires 8 years of work in the field before you even qualify to sit for the examination. Every applicant must provide a background and credit history. They have to pay for, study for, and pass their trade examination plus a business law exam. And I have actually been in examination review meetings, in particular where we've invited some applicants to come in for an interview with our exam committee. I have seen grown men cry when the exam committee has approved their application for licensure, because it represents such an opportunity and hope, and it's the chance for them to work for themselves. In many cases, some of the applicants have not finished high school, and this represents opportunity. And I'm always reminding our staff that we're not processing licenses. We are offering hope and opportunity for entrepreneurs. The earliest licensed specialty contractor who was affected by House Bill 735 was licensed in 1982. So he has been practicing in the field, in the trade, in Pinellas County for 39 years. And the most recent was licensed last month. So you get an idea of, the range of experience. And all of these contractors are working compliant with construction licensing law. These 1,400 contractors represent about 11% of the total field of contractors that we license. So we license about 14,000. It's just over 14,000, and these 1,400, which if you do the math is 10%, but it's actually 10.6 when you look at the absolute numbers. So what about House Bill 735? I did have the opportunity to sit with Commissioner Eggers and to give him a deep dive, so thank you for inspiring this opportunity to be able to speak about it at a higher level too. House Bill 735 was signed into law last June, and it in effect eliminates all local specialty licensing effective July 1st, 2023. And the rights that were granted to the PCCLB to licensed contractors are granted under the Special Act, which we refer to as 75-489 under the laws of Florida. That is a state statute that gives us in Pinellas County the authority to issue these local licenses. Then House Bill 735 basically contradicts those rights and supersedes those rights and has eliminated our ability to license those specialty contractors. But it is also the Special Act that gives us our authority and duty and requirement because we are countywide, for all municipal building departments, including Pinellas County Building Services and St. Pete Beach Building Department. It requires them to confirm the license status of any contractor before they issue a building permit. And that is also a state statute, and it is reiterated under the Special Act. So what that means is that there is a direct relationship between when a building permit is required for construction and the licensed contractor who can perform that work. And one of the challenges that we have identified, and we identified prior to the adoption of this bill. We've been screaming out to the masses, anybody who will listen, that here's one of the impacts, perhaps an unintended consequence of House Bill 735, is that contractors who have been performing their trade in Pinellas County have been compliant with their license, go to the building departments, do the proper thing by getting their permits. As soon as we eliminate their license, those contractors will no longer be allowed to pull those building permits. And you might remember when we were here for our budget meeting, I had told you the story about our pile driving experience, where we had recommended as a department to our PCCLB board we were looking to eliminate some local licenses on our own, doing an internal evaluation. We recommended to the board that we eliminate the pile driving license because pile driving can be done by a general contractor or a marine specialty contractor. And so, there were very few contractors who were impacted by this. We made that recommendation and the board accepted it. And in November of the year prior, 2020, the board confirmed the elimination of the pile driving classification. We let the contractor know that he no longer had to require a license in that field. And 3 months later, he went to pull a permit at the building department in Pinellas County. But they declined to issue that building permit to him because the work did not qualify under his marine specialty contractor's license, which would allow him to build piles out on the water, but he did not have the general contractor's license to be able to do piles on land. It was his pile driving license that allowed him to do this work on land. He had been doing it for 25 years. Our well-intentioned decision to eliminate that classification had an unintended consequence by prohibiting him from doing the work that he had been able to do. That's when all the the lightning struck and the bells were ringing and going, okay, here's the real impact of this proposed legislation. And I had the privilege of working very closely with Brian Lowak as we tried to let all of the influencers know what the impact would be. The one thing that the House Bill 735 does do is it confirms our continuing right to license journeymen, which are apprentice licenses. And it did eliminate one classification, but there were 0 contractors who were impacted by that. It does have a financial impact on the department because now House Bill 735 is dictating the level of fees that we can charge for journeyman applications. And so our current fee has been $75. It's been that for as long as I've been associated with the department, for 4 years. But now, under House Bill 735, effective July 1st, 2023, that will be a maximum of $25. So there is some impact, financial impact on the journeyman side. But with the elimination of these 18 specialty licenses, as I said, there are about 1,400 contractors who are impacted. Some of the classifications that are impacted will have no effect, or those contractors will still be able to get up and continue their business the day after it goes into effect. Those would be painting contractors, tile and marble contractors, and cabinet specialty contractors. In most cases, none of that work requires a building permit, so those contractors will still be able to continue their trade without impact. There is a specialty called the finished carpentry specialty, and a finished carpentry is just below the trade. The scope of work is just below that of a carpentry specialty contractor. So a finished carpentry specialist can do molding and flooring and do a lot of cabinetry work. Most of those things never require a permit. However, a finished carpentry specialist can do windows and doors currently, and that privilege will be eliminated by House Bill 735. The only trades that will be able to do windows and doors will be those that are licensed by the state. So there are finished carpentry specialists. We have 247 of them. I cannot tell you how many of those do windows and doors, but if any of them do, their ability has just been eliminated. The other thing that we have done to look at what the potential impact is of this bill is I did a complete survey of all of the building departments across Pinellas County. Of course, Pinellas County Building Services is consolidated, has consolidated and is performing building and permitting services for a number of the municipalities. But in effect, I found 17 different permitting agencies across the county. And among them, there is great inconsistency on what requires a permit and what does not. For example, to build a fence in unincorporated Pinellas County, you do not need a building permit. But to build a fence in Clearwater, you do. To do drywall work in Pinellas County, you don't need a building permit until it reaches above a certain square footage. It's a high level. However, in St. Pete Beach, where much of the territory is below sea level, they do require a building permit for drywall. So we have some inconsistencies where a contractor, my neighbor is a fencing contractor, he can continue building fences in unincorporated Pinellas County because it doesn't require a permit, but he can't build a fence in Clearwater after his local specialty has been eliminated. So there are other contractors as well that may be affected by this: flatwork masonry, paving specialty contractors, plaster and stucco contractors. It depends on the nature of the work that they're doing and the jurisdiction in Pinellas County where they are doing that. Now, one of the things that we are taking the initiative on is that the PCCLB will be in one of our strategic plan elements for 2022 is to host a series of roundtable discussions for all of the municipal building departments, any of those, kind of an open door invitation where we can talk about some of these inconsistencies in permitting. We can talk about new technologies. We can talk about other challenges that are faced across this common element. So we have proposed our very first roundtable discussion for the end of January, although I must confess, we might want to wait and put it the second week of February so we can get through the COVID curve that we're on. Because for us to have the real impact, it should be an in-person meeting, right? So we can really facilitate discussion about things like this. But I also want you to know that on the PCCLB board, there are 4 building officials. So they're part of my constant consultation group. And I also, surveyed across all of the building departments. So this is a role. The common element is that we have that county-wide authority. So we're trying to foster some relations and try to minimize the impact that this will have on, basically on entrepreneurs. Contractors are entrepreneurs. Now, there are 78 contractors in 4 classifications that may be eligible to upgrade to the state specialty structure certification. And what that means is that there is a state class that does a lot of the same work that each of these specialties do, but it also does more. Their scope of work is broader. So for example, we have a garage door specialty contractor. There is a life safety factor in installing, repairing garage doors, and it does require a permit. All of our garage door contractors may be eligible to upgrade to the state, it's called a specialty structure contractor. But some of them may not be, because it does require 5 years of locally licensed expertise in order to grandfather in. It also requires that you never have had any suspensions, and I can't attest, until we dive in individually, who might not be eligible because of suspensions. And there are other factors as well. That is for them to grandfather up to that classification. Others may be eligible to retest, to take that examination, but they basically have to start from scratch. So there is a little proviso here. It says not all contractors will qualify. There are 6 specialties that do require permits, primarily because the work is structural or it is affected or impacted by wind load, and they will be prohibited from pulling permits anywhere in Pinellas County. Those are carpentry contractors, depending on the nature of the work that they are doing. Natural gas contractors, think about that for a second. We are eliminating the specialty that, licenses natural gas contractors, non-electrical sign contractors, and the pile driving contractor. Again, he's not going to be able to pull permits to do the work he's been doing for over 25 years. My fear with him is that he may retire. So how do contractors, what will they do to mitigate this? Unfortunately, we're going to lose some contractors to retirement. I want to talk about, some of the other repercussions in 1 second. There are 8 specialties that are licensed by both the county and the state. They are not part of the 14, but all of those 8 specialties that we have been licensing, where we license them only locally, based on the authority given to us by the Special Act, those contractors will have to register with DBPR and become state certified contractors. And again, they may be eligible. There are some that may not be eligible. And then I mentioned about the 1 journeyman classification. So what we have come to is that there's 3 levels of economic impact in and on Pinellas County as a result of House Bill 735. The first, and everybody thinks that this is the one that we're most concerned about, is that there is a revenue impact to the PCCLB. That is forecasted, when I was working with Brian Lowak, we forecasted it to be about $1 million over 3 years. It's not unsubstantial, but that is not the biggest impact on contractors and on business in Pinellas County. The biggest impact is the 550 contractors will be prohibited from pulling building permits, and they will lose the ability to work in their trade, the same trade that we have already licensed them to work in for however, anywhere from 39 to years to 1 month. Those contractors will not be able to perform their work. And most of those specialty contractors are business owners, and all of them are entrepreneurs. So what are contractors' options? They can upgrade their skills. They can test up to the next level. Those that are eligible, we will assist them in grandfathering to the state classification. But that doesn't cover everybody. Another option for...
Can you give them an example of that? So if you get a general contractor's license, can you do any of the subspecialty type? I mean, that's...
Certainly.
Yeah, so.
If, there are 3 contractors that sit at the highest level. I always call them the big 3. They are general contractor, building contractor, and residential contractor. Any contractor can always upgrade to that next level. And they go in kind of... descending order, with general contractor at the highest, residential contractor is the first entry point. But consider that you're a garage door specialty contractor. The skills and expertise and knowledge that you have and the testing that was done for you to get your garage door license versus what's required to know how to be a residential contractor, to build multifamily, multi-story homes, there's a big gap there. So we don't know how many of those specialty contractors may be eligible or willing to invest to upgrade to that highest level. Now, some of them can, so I talked about some of those who can upgrade to the state specialty and the structural. So that garage door contractor, he may just have to expand, a little greater knowledge to also know how to do aluminum siding as part of that structural license that's at the state level, but it is beyond the scope of their existing training. But it is an option. Upgrading skills for a contractor is always an option. Another option is that they can become a W-2 employee of an eligible contractor. So they could become a W-2 employee of a general contractor, a building contractor, a residential contractor in order to be qualified to continue doing that work. But these are entrepreneurs who are highly unlikely to want to become employees of someone else's construction business. Now, they can also find a contractor. Generally, again, it's one of those big three, to qualify their business. That's what it's referred to in the trade, is to qualify their business, which means that they work under the authority and supervision of one of the big three contractors. And that is an option. But ultimately what that becomes is that the big three contractor is lending his license to the other person just to allow them to pull permits. There's unlikely to be that direct supervision requirement. And what it also means is that there's an extra level of profit taking, right? Because now you have to pay that GC, let's say $100 an incident or $700 a month or, whatever the going price may be. That is going to be passed on to consumers. So my fencing neighbor, he could find a residential contractor to qualify his business that would allow him to continue to pull permits everywhere in the county. But the GC really has just lent his license. Or somebody corrected me once when I said that. They said, you mean selling their license, right? And of course, that will increase prices to consumers because anything that is going to increase the price to the contractor is going to be passed on to the consumer. And then, of course, the other risk is contractors could choose to work without a permit. And that is a violation of Florida licensing law. And one of the challenges, this is just my own personal struggle with this, is how do you cite a contractor for unlicensed contracting, for working without a permit, doing the work that he was licensed to do, he or she was licensed to do a month ago because the state took that license away. So that is another risk. Another risk, too, that is not up here is that contractors may get out of the business. And the one thing that if you've tried to get any work done in Pinellas County, we have a shortage of contractors, and we can't afford to lose any of these, especially the good guys, the guys who have been compliant all along. So how are we helping the contractors prepare for change? Well, we are providing resources, recommendations. We have a communication strategy planned to reach out to all of the contractors to help those who are eligible to upgrade, to help those who are eligible to grandfather. We also have to prepare for any of those who are looking to become state certified. We can provide affidavits of licensure. It says that, it's a letter of good standing. This contractor has been licensed locally and licensed by examination, and provide that background. Bless you. So we'll be, supporting contractors in their ability to become licensed in other ways. Of course, we'll be working with the municipalities to identify where and if any permitting inconsistencies can be eliminated. But the thing to remember is that building permits are a requirement of the Florida Building Code. So there is, we have some room in order to make it more consistent, but there are certain things that will always require a permit. And the last element is that we also propose waiting until July 1st, 2023, when the state mandate goes into effect, before we adopt these changes in Pinellas County. We do not want to be the ones to eliminate a contractor's ability to work compliant in Pinellas County by implementing this earlier. So what I am hopeful for is that we would have your endorsement to wait, make that our effective date. Because another option is a lot can happen at the state level between now and July 1st, 2023. How will this impact our business? Of course, we're going to continue registering and licensing contractors. However, it will be only in the state certified classifications from that day forward. We will continue monitoring contractors' insurance. We will continue enforcing construction licensing laws. A lot of people, I've heard some terrible rumors that the PCCLB is going away as a result of House Bill 735. That is not the case at all. Our duty to protect the citizens will continue. It's just that our work is now limited to those 13,000 to 14,000 state licensed contractors. And we will continue to accept applications for contractors to become locally licensed in those state classifications as well, because that is a service that we provide. And we'll continue, doing our local hearings, monitoring amendments to the Florida Building Code, and arbitrating any disputes. We'll continue work as usual. So we're not going anywhere.
Anything else?
Let's see. I think that's it. So thank you.
Commissioner's question, Commissioner Seal.
Thank you. What are the other counties doing?
It's interesting that you ask that. It was middle of November. I attended a conference of the Construction Licensing Officials Association of Florida, which represents many counties across the state. Now, it was still during COVID time, so it was not a full representation of counties, but the impact and how this has been interpreted and how it's being applied is very different from county to county. So, for example, Hillsborough County immediately eliminated all of the local specialty classifications. As soon as the law was signed, effective date July 1st, 2021, that was it. They eliminated them all. Now, they don't have a special act that provides that additional higher level of governance. So I have not spoken with the Hillsborough officials, but I do know that that's the action that they have taken. Now, in other counties that I spoke with at the CLOAF conference, they're faced with the exact same challenges that we are. Some of them have decided to wait to July 1st, 2023. Some of them made changes to their local specialties immediately, but the impact to contractors in all of those territories is exactly the same as the projected impact for Pinellas County. Does that answer your question?
Yes, to a certain degree. So let's use Hillsborough as an example. So if they don't have the PCCLB like we do in the special act, then just the state then decides if they have workers' comp and they have liability insurance, and the state checks for that or not?
The state does check for that when you make your initial license application, and that when you do your 2-year renewal, they would also confirm that. But they're not checking, in the middle of your insurance year to make sure that your policy is still in effect. They're not checking when it expires, outside of their cycle. Once you're licensed by the state, you're continued to be licensed by the state until your status is revoked or you don't renew. Now, what Hillsborough did is not unlike what we are having to do, which is we published something on our website that was inspired by what Hillsborough had published as well. And that shows for each of the specialties, if a permit is required, what will be the minimum standard that is required from that point forward. So the example, let's say for somebody who's doing windows and doors, that you will have to be a residential building or general contractor in order to pull a permit to do that work. So eliminated the specialty and now made the standard so much higher. So they published a list that is very similar to the list that we have currently published on our website as well. It says, if this, then that. If you were doing this and the work requires a permit, you will now be required to be either this, that, or the other.
Okay. Does this affect the coastal construction?
No,
line
it does
at all?
not. It does
Okay.
not at all.
But that's within our special act that gave us the ability to keep it where it was and to govern it. I know that was a big deal to all of the beaches.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is not impacted by that, and our role as the custodian of that will continue.
Okay. Because the other option I was thinking about was, well, maybe we should just get out of the business.
Well, here's the thing is that,
Because it's going to start costing us money from the general fund, I would predict.
how would that, I
Well-
don't see a correlation with that.
Well, no, back
Well,
to
if you're
your,
going to lose
to
$1
your
million
fees.
over 3 years.
To your fees, that is something we have to look at. And so for, general audience, this is a self-supporting group, so they live by the fees that they charge. It's like the building department. The cost of the service is borne by the fees. So that's something that we have to look at.
We
But it's
have
only
done.
11 It's only 11%, but
Right.
go ahead.
We have done models to forecast, and yes, $1 million over 3 years is substantial, but it is not our primary source of revenue. We earn our revenues from 3 sources, and as Barry said, I call us an eat what you kill department. We earn revenues from licensing, the majority of those being state licensed contractors, right? They have to register with us. The second is that we earn revenues from citations that are issued for unlicensed contracting. That is a significant part of what we do, is the enforcement and compliance part of enforcing construction licensing law. And the third aspect that where we receive our revenues is from issuing expired permit violations on behalf of building departments. So a contractor he doesn't close out his building permit in a timely manner, then that permit comes to us through the building department. We issue expired permit violations on behalf of 5 jurisdictions, Pinellas County being one of them. And there is a $300 violation for not closing out your permit properly. And the second part of that is that you are required then to go close out the permit, which then generates revenue for the building department and gets the work inspected and resolved. Our revenues in the past year were impacted by the fact that building permits did not expire during the COVID period, but all of the building departments are now getting back into and taking care of those expired permits.
But that's also some of the reasons for looking at the ways we can most efficiently run the department and, try to increase the way in which we coordinate the application of services versus, the way we've traditionally done it, so.
Commissioner Eggers.
Michelle, thank you. Really appreciated when we had the opportunity to speak down at your office. Obviously, this set off alarm buttons for me because you're talking about people's livelihoods being affected possibly. And at the end of the day, also, our residents may be hiring people to do work that aren't insured. So, those are two issues I think we need to be at least aware of, at least letting people know that there's maybe a category of contractors that you yourself are going to have to check on that.
Absolutely. It does put the onus on consumers, on citizens to.
So both aspects concern me a little bit. Just to make sure I'm clear, 90% of the contractors will still go through the same process that we are now.
That's correct.
Okay, so they're going to be insured, they're going to still get licensed, we're going to make sure that they have all the appropriate licenses and that kind of thing. So we're talking about these 1,400, less a certain number that, as you said, can get the license at the state level.
Right. The forecast is that approximately 550 of those 1,400 are those who will be impacted.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the shortage of contractors because that really is a concern that we're having. I mean, I was talking to a chief this morning about a fire station that they're talking about building. And when they first started talking about it, it was about $300 a square foot. Right. And now it's going to be $600 a square foot for the construction of their building. Now, they may have to put it on hold and wait till prices come down. It's about availability of talent and the raw product availability.
Materials.
So it's both, both issues. But so it's alarming to think that we might be putting certain people out of work at a time when, I mean, for them themselves bad, but also for the fact that we need more contractors.
We need more contractors.
So that does concern me. To the areas that we're talking about, and you all are reviewing what might be needed. So they come in, these folks that are no longer licensed come in for a permit. Are there some of those areas that we're continuing to explore that may not, that we're saying don't require a permit, but you still must come in lieu of getting that permit, you still must come in and show us that you're licensed and, or not licensed, but that you still have insurance? Is there a way that we can still do that minimal check? So in lieu of a permit.
So what I'd like to do is kind of separate the question. There are some contractors who do not require building permits, but do require other types of permits. For example, a driveway contractor may not require a permit to do the work. Under the Florida Building Code, they don't require a building permit, but they may still require a right-of-way permit or a zoning clearance or a habitat permit, if it's impacting trees. Those do not require licenses. So a contractor who has that residential driveway business will still be able to do their work. So that addresses a certain portion of your question. The second part of it is, let's talk about that drywall contractor, for example, where you don't need a drywall permit in unincorporated Pinellas County, but you do in St. Pete Beach. That's what we hope to facilitate, foster those conversations to say, what is their interpretation of the Florida Building Code that is making them interpret that they require a building permit to do that work. Yeah. And so we're hoping that by having already identified where the discrepancies are, that we can help to, maybe the word is negotiate, or help to eliminate, find some standardization in the interpretations, and especially where there is no life safety issue.
I mean, think about like fencing that you mentioned, that for some reason cities feel that they need to, whether they want to or whether they think it's dictated by the state building code, and we don't require that, at least if it's 6 foot.
That's correct.
8 foot we do.
Exactly.
So I think there will be some opportunities where we can eliminate that permit requirement.
And to your point,
I also think that taking this a step further, we really need to look at whether or not we need all those different licensings in place or inspections. So let's take fencing. I went through this before, and we had less than 5%, 2% or 3% of all inspections. A person comes out, they say, I'm going to put, here's my lot lines, I've got it marked, I'm going to put it here. Well, what happens if you go out and inspect and they put it in the wrong spot? Well, then you make them move it. Well, do we really need to go out and inspect that when 2% of them actually fail? Or if the neighbor complains, then you go out and inspect and make them move it? Or do we need to inspect every single one? So that's the roundtable that I think will have those discussions about those different areas, because that would, if we can free up building inspectors, we all know that we're having trouble hiring enough building inspectors, getting out to contractors in a timely manner. Maybe there's some things that we no longer need to do that'll make our whole operating department more efficient. But that's the roundtable discussions about that, to kind of go through those and see if we can get consistency and make a determination.
Yeah. Now, and I wanted to say to that point, that's a great idea. I'm really excited that you're going to be doing that. I was just talking to a contractor again this morning. He said it's so frustrating to go around this county and do work because there's, well, he said 40 different organizations. You pointed out 17. I said it was, well, there's no more than 24 cities in the county's the 25th, but certainly there's a lot of them, and they have to go sometimes to one place for a fire code issues, and some place to, go to a building department. So it's really confusing. To the extent that we can do any of that, I think that's a mountain to climb, but at least some of that will be an improvement. So kudos to you. And if we can extend the time to 2023, that allows our folks to continue making a living and allows our residents to continue being protected, I'm all for it. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
From my perspective, and I just think that's something. I think the option of giving your contractors your license to a general contractor is probably 0%. I'm talking to a number of contractors, and they say, it's tough enough to keep control of my own people under my license because I have responsibilities. There is no way I'm going to give it to somebody else. So,
That's one of the good guys.
Yeah.
The other guys are happy to sell their license,
money.
right?
Yeah, I get it. So, but we have to consider all of those. So anything we can do to help out, anything we can do to minimize permit requirements, I think continues to extend people's livelihoods. But the unknown piece to all of that is still this insurance thing. So I'm still concerned about folks that go on to people's homes and they are uninsured. And if something happens to them, I'm talking about these 10%, now, it's the 10 or 11% or less, maybe 500 out of the 1,400. That our residents, we need to make sure that it's buyer beware. We are not checking on insurance. You need to do that.
And I think that that is part of our communication strategy, is to work with communications to spread that word about, here's where licenses are required. And in all of these other trades, make sure that you check their qualifications, check their references, ask specifically to see evidence of their workers' compensation insurance, ask to see evidence of their general liability insurance, and that we do that to educate consumers to help themselves. I also had been consulting too with Doug Templeton of Consumer Protection, because they have a vested interest as well. We are often, frequently, when we get a complaint about a contractor and about the workmanship or the character of a contractor, that's where we have authority. But Consumer Protection gets that same complaint because the contractor took off with the homeowner's money and didn't perform the work. So we often share information and resources, and part of the story that we need to tell is that Consumer Protection includes an aspect of protecting yourself. And when things go really wrong, if they're not licensed, then you do have that as an option.
My last comment was going to be towards that, which is the fact that we currently, if I'm not mistaken, through the licensing process, we check for felony issues. So that if you have a contractor coming out to your house doing work in your house, in your home, you at least know that there's been a background check, and that they don't have a felony. So you have a felony, you don't have a felony, and you're insured. and at least you have that minimum level. Then, as you say, even then, you try to get references and recommendations.
Right.
But I do think that's another element that at least it's going to be buyer beware kind of things. But anyway, if we can extend the time, try to reduce the permit areas, but making sure somehow that we try to check on the insurance and then let our residents know what the change is and it's coming, I think will be critical pieces of all this. So, but thank you for bringing this to my attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it, too.
Commissioner Gerard?
Well, I think most of my questions have been answered. One of my questions was, how do we sustain it monetarily if we're not charging licensing fees? But it sounds like we're already talking about that. But do we see any possibility that this could change in this session? Is there any support from like state contractors associations or anything?
I haven't seen any specific evidence. But a lot can happen between now and July of 2023.
Only 2 sessions to go through.
And I have heard rumors, but I've not seen anybody, or I'm not aware of anybody stepping up to challenge the existing legislation.
But Brian's on top of that.
Yes, of course. Together we are.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Commissioner Seal?
I'm just curious, who pushed the legislation?
As I understand it, it was driven by 2 factors. The first is there is a very strong lobby of general contractors who want to keep a larger piece of the pie. And so that is one aspect that I have been told has been an influencing factor. Another is that I think that there was some misinformation that was sold to the legislators about what the purpose of this legislation was. If you look at the language of the legislation, it is actually called the preemption of local occupational licensing. Now, as I understand it, and this precedes my history with Pinellas County, but as I understand it, there was at one time a series of occupational licenses that were issued by each of the municipalities. Pinellas County actually has a dedicated occupational license page on our county website that specifically addresses that, and it says, in Pinellas County, you do not need an occupational license. You may need a construction trade license, which is different, but check with your local municipality. But the one thing that we do know is that those occupational licenses that were issued by or required by each of the municipalities, as I understand it, they were renamed into business tax receipts. And if you want to do business in Clearwater, you have to go get a business tax receipt to register your business in Clearwater. Now, that's regardless of whether you need a license or not. And that the burden, I think it was addressing what you had said, Commissioner Eggers, about having to go to 40 different places to get all the permits and approvals that you need to do business. I think that was conflated with the actual construction trade license that is skills-based, right? You don't need a skills test to be a pressure washer, although there are risks involved with pressure washing. But if you want to pressure wash in Largo, you have to go get a business tax receipt. You don't need a license, but you need a business tax receipt. And you have to go to St. Pete Beach, and you have to go to Pinellas Park. If you are a garage door contractor and you want to install garage doors in Clearwater, you have to get a business tax receipt. You're licensed by the PCCLB countywide, but each municipality has their own requirement. And I think that that's what started some of this, the motivation and the argument for the elimination of the licenses, but the water got very muddy. And I personally watched a lot of the debates, and there was a lot of misinformation and a lot of false information that was presented as data. You should have heard me. I was screaming at my computer monitor going, that's not true. You're wrong. But nobody could hear me. But
To go back real quick to that business tax receipt, if my business, my garage door business is located in Largo, but I work in all 24 cities, I just need that one receipt in the city that I'm operating out of, or
As
everywhere
I
I'm doing
understand
business?
it, you need it for each jurisdiction that you are working in.
Okay. Commissioner Eggers, you had one more?
Yeah, just a couple of things, real quick. First of all, it would be my goal that you continue tracking those 1,400 licenses. It sounds like we're down to 500 that we have a concern for.
Right.
And the goal would be to make that 0. So somehow that we continue working over the next year or two so that these folks don't have to retire. They're not going to be able to go GC, so they're going to be out of work. And that's absolutely not what the intention, I'm sure, of the state was. It
I'm
wasn't
sure
to
as
put
well.
people out of work.
It was like our
It
pile
was-
driving
yeah,
experience.
Yeah, it was probably to try to do less government intervention
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and I get that, I understand. It also seems to me that there's only 2 or 3 counties in the state that have this kind of thing that we have, this
That is true.
special act. So you're not going to have a rush of counties going up to Tallahassee for change. And I want to commend Brian. Last year was leading the effort on getting those words to our legislative delegation. Hey, exempt us folks that have special act. It's not to put onus on these folks, but it's really to make sure that they're properly insured and our residents are properly protected. So, I mean, you guys did a great job. Because it's just a couple of counties that have that, I don't see that changing. Brian, you might share something differently on that. But if there is any, hope for change, I'm sure we would do that. But I think we're pretty much stuck with this, and it's just a matter of how we go about making them able to still do work in this county.
Agreed.
And so we'll keep looking at that number. Hopefully it'll keep dropping down as we'll go over the next 2 years, at least. Thank you.
I had one specific question on, we keep talking about the garage door, and I pulled up the chart that you have on your website. And so if they have a garage door specialty, which was established about 30 years ago, now they need a general building residential specialty structure contractor license. What's the difference? So let's say I've been doing garage doors, and that's, what now do I have to do? What kind of education classes, testing, will I have to do if I wanted to comply with the new state law?
Well, the testing and the experience that you're required to get from garage doors locally to residential is very high. That's a very high gap. But to get from our garage door specialty to the state structural specialty contractor, which is the one, that's that fourth one that you mentioned there, that is not an enormous leap. And many of our local contractors may qualify for that grandfathering into that classification. That was specifically one of the ones that I had mentioned. Now, they may, if their license is not recognized because the structural specialty classification includes a much broader range. It includes hurricane doors, for example, that maybe the garage door specialty guide doesn't have that same expertise. They may require testing and examination, but the gap is much smaller. And I think depending on the motivation of the contractor, some may choose to take that leap if it is required.
Yeah, and I know this has got to be some massive flow chart of if you're this, then you're this, and and I get that. I'm just thinking about the guy who's been doing this one specialty, garage doors for 30 years. He's in his 50s, and now you're going to tell me I got to take some classes or testing or whatever to get that next state license, and that's a hurdle in education. It's a hurdle financially, hurdle psychologically.
Yeah.
And and it's not showing that there's a dramatic need. There's not a problem we're solving or the state is trying to solve here on some of these specific issues. So
And I hope that, what I'm hopeful is that some of this conversation is happening at the state level, and that, that kind of like with our pile driving experience, it was an unintended consequence, and that the state can then take action to make it easier for these contractors to continue their work. I have no predictions about it. I can tell you that we had a contractor come in, I think it was sometime in October. It was after his license had expired. And he was coming in and he was making his license good because he hadn't renewed before the expiration date. And He is a locally licensed specialty structure contractor. So he may be building sheds, for example. And so he said to me, what am I going to do? And I said, well, you can upgrade. You can, if you're qualified, you can grandfather to that state specialty. You can write your commissioner. You can call your local senator. There are all these active ways that you can become engaged. And I wanted to cry after my interaction with him because he said to me, my mother just died. He was probably 55, 60 years old. He's the man that you're talking about. He was in front of me. He said, my mother's just died. My father just died. My wife and I just got separated. I'm finally getting ready to get back into business, and now they're going to take my license away. What am I supposed to do? And it was, I will do everything that I can to help you to get there. We're going to give you a letter of good standing. We're going to give you the shortcut link so that, to get you to the application form. We're going to help you get there, but you're going to have to do this on your own. And he walked away, and my heart was broken because I can't fix that for him. He's been working in Pinellas County. He's one of those good guys who, until these terrible things that happened in his life, had maintained his license compliant for all that time, and it was heartbreaking. These are the stories. Yeah, we issue licenses, but really, it's about that hope and opportunity that is people's livelihoods.
Commissioner Gerard.
I just had a question about a specialty contractor's ability to contract with a general contractor to supervise that work that absolutely has to be done or the permit has to be pulled. Is that something that they can do, or is there something that needs to happen in the statute for that?
No, they can create those partnerships and find someone to qualify their business, and let's just hope that it is for the right reasons.
Well,
that
and
it
that's
meets
what I'm wondering, if do we
right.
need to change something to make sure
We do not
that's
need to do
legitimate?
anything. For those guys who are the good guys who are doing it the right way, then we of course support them. For somebody who's just selling off the right, that is a violation of construction licensing law. It's a $500 fine for a first infraction, and of course, contracting to an unlicensed subcontractor is also a violation of construction licensing law and is also eligible for a $500 fine, both to the guy who has accepted the subcontract and the contractor who engaged him.
Okay.
Just one last, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Egger, missing the microphone this year already.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I just hope that there's a way we can tie getting, so somebody like we're talking about comes in to get a permit and they can't pull one technically. If it's not disallowed by the state, then maybe there's a way in exchange for the permit that you show something about insurance and you show something about, background check status or something, so that you say, yeah, we're not going to require the permit. You can do your work, but do you have insurance and do you have this? Can we still do that? Is that still something
We
that is?
can't do that. That was certainly one of the areas that we explored with the county attorney's office is there a way that we can still register contractors, just to monitor their insurance? We cannot do that. And the only reason that they would visit the building department is if the building permit is required. And if the building permit is required, then that contractor must be licensed, and we perform that service on behalf of all of the building departments.
But if it's required under state law versus local. There's two different things, so I didn't know if maybe.
Not in the, yeah, so we did have quite a discussion with the whole group of our county attorney specialists, and what it does come down to is if it is a requirement of the Florida Building Code that a building permit be
Right.
issued,
There's nothing you can do.
there's
about
nothing we can do.
Right. But there are
But
some-
in those interpretations, so perhaps what we don't know is, and I don't want to single Clearwater out, but they require a permit. Is the permit because for aesthetic control reasons, or is it because of their interpretation of the Florida
Right.
Building Code? That's where we have the opportunity
Yeah.
to influence those discussions.
Great.
And those are the kinds of discussions that we would be having.
Yeah, that roundtable will hopefully. get that.
Exactly.
Thank you for doing that. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Anything further? Thank you very much for being with us this morning. We appreciate it, and
It's-
appreciate that you'll keep watching it, and Mr. Loack will keep watching, and as we move forward in the next couple of years.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. And so may I take away the endorsement of the Board of County Commissioners to extend this, we make it effective with the
That
state
doesn't
mandate?
require an act of the commission,
June
does
1st?
it?
Okay.
This doesn't require an act of the commission, so I don't think they need to act on that. I
Very
think you're
good.
looking for concurrence. And-
Yes.
Because I actually was looking to move it up until I found out how complicated this was. And then I changed my tune after hearing the difficulties associated with this, but
Yeah, I think there's a lot of moving parts, and I think there is always slight hope that it could get tweaked in Tallahassee.
thank you, Michelle.
Thank you all.
Mr. Administrator, next on our agenda is the agenda briefing.
So I have two different things. Which one you want first, COVID update or agenda brief?
COVID.
Okay, COVID. Well, a lot has changed very quickly, as you know. We met our executive policy team. We met yesterday, and we discussed kind of the new stage we're in. And obviously, COVID is running rampant. About a week and a half ago, we authorized to stand up our Largo site again. If you recall back in the fall, it was being handled by the private sector for testing, and so we shut down the site. The one thing we did, though, was we kept the building, and we kept paying the rent because of our concern of having just what we're facing and stress on our private providers to be able to do testing. So we stood that site back up. It's run by CD-ROM McGuire. We're paying the rent and stuff, but they're running it, and they're billing federal government and insurance and things. So from that standpoint, that's the only cost to us is our infrastructure. But that site is up and running. Between there and the Healthy St. Pete, they're testing 1,000 people a day. So it is very, very busy. And that includes, you're also going to Walgreens and CVS and all the other, private providers. So there's a lot of testing going on. Over the last 7-day period, our percent positivity is at 22.71%. I will tell you, Dr. Cho told me yesterday that this week's going to come out, it's going to be over 30%. So it is running rampant, but also that's not a surprise. We've heard that and we know that. It's very different than what we've seen. The CDC modified their guidelines, and we if we haven't sent those out to you, we will, because we're going to be communicating with our employees about just trying to take preventative measures. It's not an issue. Obviously, the new variant is not something, unless you're unvaccinated, that is putting you in the hospital on a respirator. But what it is taking you out of the game, and it is the spread of this that is the concern. We have significant issues operationally within Pinellas County. For instance, the sheriff, has a significant issue in the jail right now. And if staff is out, guess what? Then other staff have to cover those shifts. It's the same way in any type of, essential function out there. It's a staffing issue as much as it is managing, the COVID itself. And that's what's happening in the hospitals. Our hospitals are not overly stressed at this point. That could change. It's primarily having staff available. We did, Dr. Jameson went back to our COVID procedures because we're having ambulance delays at the hospital. And so we implemented revised procedures that we had in place last fall. We're working hand in hand with our hospitals to cut down on those delays, because when a drop-off is delayed by more than 15 minutes, well, then that takes that ambulance out of being able to respond to other calls. So that's beginning to back up some of the system, and it's having an impact. The nursing homes is less severe at this point. We had our lessons learned from isolating and how to do proper care. And so for the most part, except with a few instances, they're being able to manage those in place and not have calls for people to be taken out of the nursing home. The schools, if you read about that, they set up another testing site for the teachers, for the students, and their families. So that, again, will help with getting tests available for people. And the monoclonal site is still open until January 31st, but we're encouraging people to check the website. That is obviously state-run and state-controlled, and so that it's scheduled to end on January 31st. That'll be up to the state whether they continue that or not. The booster is very effective. But the main thing we're doing within Pinellas County is really going back to kind of our modified procedures. We know that that if you, to the extent we can have barriers, to the extent people can wear masks, and things that we can do to try to prevent the spread as much as possible. We still have to continue operations, and so we're posting the CDC guidelines, which does significantly change the way in which we manage this. So the CDC guidelines, if you test positive, stay home for 5 days. If you have no symptoms, after 5 days, you can leave the house, continue to wear a mask for an additional 5 days. That is the CDC guideline. If you were exposed to someone, but you have been vaccinated, would then wear a mask for another 10 days and a test on day 5. So there's some modified procedures that we're going to continue to push out and try to keep our staff safe. It's really a staffing issue, but it is having an operational impact. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Commissioner Eggers?
It'd be nice to, when we have the discussion, just to make sure, because things that we hear, and none of us are medical in the medical fields, but that this particular variant is not really a lung-based, it's more throat and upper body. I'd just like to know more about that. And I'm not necessarily asking for, answers here, but I mean, to the extent that lung issues and, being able to breathe obviously created a lot of the problems in the past. This is a little different from what I'm hearing and understanding. So maybe if you can see if our doctors can give us an update on that, just because I think, the idea that it's spreading so fast but the effects is a different story. So I just want to make sure we understand the two pieces together. So
I'll get you some more information from our doctors.
And then the question I had was, I think it was Mayor Demings from Orange County reported that in their hospitals in Orange County, it was like 90-something% of the patients that were hospitalized were unvaccinated. Mayor Gelber reported that in Miami-Dade, 70% of the hospitalization was unvaccinated. But we never seem to be able to get that kind of breakdown for Pinellas hospitals.
Yeah, I don't have that here, but I will by Tuesday. I want to be able to provide that type of information. But I have no doubt that we're going to see similar, statistics.
Okay.
But on that point, I do think that, there are some of the issues that have come up that in some cases, for people that are vaccinated, it's so minor that some people are even asymptomatic.
Yes.
But some of those vaccinated people are getting it too. So it's not like singling out unvaccinated. It's about vaccinated getting it, maybe less in a milder form. And I think, just again, being aware of all of that, I think part of the discussion is important.
And we're looking at how we kind of continue to operate. It's kind of a new era of these outbreaks, and and how do we deal with this? A little bit different than we did before, and we're looking at internally because we've been at this a long time, and and staff have they got COVID, they had to take time off, now they get an outbreak. there's no rhyme or reason, necessarily for that. But it has an impact on them and their families, and especially their paycheck if they are out of time. And so we have some internal things that we're working on to work with our employees to get through this.
Any other questions? All right, moving on.
Okay, on to the agenda. We have some presentations and awards, 1, 2, and 3. On our public hearings, the first public hearing is a recommendation to continue the matter. This is the alley that we had the long discussion on. We did meet with Safety Harbor, and then I met with the applicant. The north-south piece, the 10-foot right-of-way, nobody has an issue with the vacation of that piece. The 50-foot right-of-way, to vacate that, however, is much more complicated. And we actually think there's a way for them to accomplish that without a vacation, and that creates a lot of other issues. We've been unable to, we met with them once. They agreed to meet with us and with Safety Harbor to go through some of those issues because, in fact, there's some fire department regulations that may increase their cost of construction that they wouldn't necessarily have to do. So we want that opportunity to meet, but they were unavailable during the holidays. The applicant was. And so we're going to request that we continue the 50-foot alleyway piece until we can have that meeting. Okay.
Barry, they do have representation now, you said, I think.
Yes.
So
They hired Brian, and he was not familiar when we met. He was not familiar with the background and details, and so he was looking forward to getting into some more of those details. And I think that'll serve all the parties very well.
yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Item 6.7, items of the circuit court. Then we have reports received for filings. Then we have miscellaneous items received for filings. Any questions on any of those? Item number 18 is declaring surplus and authorizing sale of county-owned equipment, vehicles on the attached list. Item 19 is award of a bid to Joe Payne for construction inspection services for code enforcement. Again, this goes back, this is something that we've done. We want to continue this. It's on an as-needed basis. However, this is to do residential and commercial construction plans. And that's probably one of the biggest areas that we're having is in the review of the plans. But it also provides inspection services where we have the staffing issues and to keep the workflow going. Commissioner Steele.
Yes, are they our current provider?
Tom? Yes. I'm looking
And
at the
did their
staff.
price
I
go
thought
up?
so. I don't know the answer to that. That's the reason I'm asking staff.
Yeah, just a little bit, Commissioner. I don't have the exact amount, but it did go up slightly.
Okay, all right, thank you. And well, Joe, while you're here, have we had any complaints about them?
No, as far as I know, Joe Payne is a very good contract. We've used them for the last five years, in fact.
Okay.
They've really come through.
Thank you, Joe.
Item 20 is ranking of firms with Miles Partnership. This is for CBB for digital marketing. This is up slightly. That was approved as part of the decision packages in this year and for the 22 budget.
Barry, could we just maybe have a small presentation on that one and on 21? If you could, not today, on Tuesday, just a brief presentation on both of those.
Sure.
That'd be
Okay.
good.
Della will mark that down and we'll make sure we do that.
20 and 21, Della.
And I think Miles has had the contract, I believe, longer than 2017. I think they've been with us for many years.
They have. But yeah, we'll have CBB outline
Okay.
what they're doing with that and where they're taking that.
And I guess I was just curious in the background information, and you can answer this on Tuesday, is it looks like they just did a written evaluation rather than, it says written evaluation on September 29th of 2021. It's just a huge contract. So.
It is a huge contract, but, and, I know that that's the reason I know they were looking to push more. They were taking some things out and pushing more to digital. And so there was a shifting of some of the cost, but they were also doing more with digital. and that's the reason of the increased amount. Because it was about $5 million before, now it's a little over $6 million a year, and that it is kind of the price increase that you're looking at. But part of that was not doing some other things that they used to provide non-digitally.
Yeah, I think the question would be about how much we're paying them for producing the material and how much we're paying for airtime, for lack of a better, so what percentage are we paying for
Web
designing
hosting.
the ad, and what are we for the buying of the space on whatever
Okay.
format that we're buying it on?
We'll have a presentation for Tuesday.
Thank you.
Item number 21 is ratification of the US EDA grant for $3.8 million for the Innovation Center. We knew this was coming. This is the action that allows for that. 22 is an award of a bid to Shoreline Foundation for the replacement of Fort DeSoto Bay Pier.
And just a point on this one, I'm working with our county attorney's office about if this was, and not saying for this project because of the timeline, obviously, but if this is the type of project that is a improvement to a beach park, county-owned beach park, that would be eligible under state law for TDC funds. And there's some question about piers and things that the attorney's office is looking at. But let's say it was, and then we obviously have our own plan that we have to work around as far as that. But, and it's just something for the commission to consider, is that this is $3 million, $3.7 million of penny money, correct? And so if we were eligible to use TDC funds for that, doesn't take a change to state law, doesn't take a long process of going through the whole plan, but it's $3.7 million when we're going to have 13 million at the end of this year, 30 million at the end of next year that we don't have encumbered yet, that then we could take in the penny and slide over to some non-TDC fund that would be an infrastructure that we've been talking about for years, as far as we need more money over here and we can't spend it this over here. Anyway, it's just something I want you to think about, because I'm going to be talking about that a lot with the TDC this year and seeing what we can bring forward. So just want to make that point where we're on that agenda item.
Item 23 is ranking of firms for professional engineering services pertaining to brownfield environmental assessment and restoration and remediation services. These contractors perform a variety of work, brownfield work, some asbestos investigation and remediation when necessary. Item 24 is a ranking of firms with Philips North America for the defibrillators for safety and emergency services. On to the regular agenda. Item 25 is purchase authorization for heavy and light-duty vehicles. This is really the heavy-duty vehicle piece of that that was not ready when we did all the light-duty vehicles and stuff at the last meeting. Item 26 is a Florida Job Growth Grant Fund application. This grant application is for the PIE to request $10 million in state funds, and it has a county match.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Seal.
I just had a question on this, is if we have a dollar value of what the land's worth at this point, and whether we could sell it.
For all of ARCA? Mm-hmm. I'll ask that question. I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, it's a big parcel of land and might be worth more than us putting more money in it. Erica.
I'll ask the question. I don't know the answer. Item 27 is resolution approving affordable housing advisory committee report to the State Housing Initiatives Partnership. This is a requirement, and the advisory committee makes the recommendation to you for approval. This is something you appointed many years ago. Item number 28 is a resolution assigning review of request to reduce state distance requirements for medical marijuana treatment facilities to the Pinellas County Board of Adjustment and Appeals. Staff looked at this and thought that that was a better place for these types of reviews to occur, and we can provide a staff presentation on Tuesday. to go through this in more detail.
Yeah, I think knowing what that actually means in a day-to-day is going to be important.
Correct. I thought that might be.
Commissioner Seal?
And I guess the other question for Tuesday is, can we refuse to hear these at all?
I have staff available on Tuesday. Item number 29 is a grant award from the U.S. Department of Justice for the Forensic Lab, $288,000. There's no match requirement. Item 30 is a resolution approving the American Rescue Plan spending plan. And before we went through and over November and December, we kind of outlined the different projects. Well, now we have to come up with the spending plan. There's been some adjustments to that. And so we've outlined those and what's in the first phase, and they've broken that down between the spending plan and let me get the right wording here. The what? And the potential projects. So you have tranche 1, tranche 2. Now they've defined it as spending plan and potential projects. These are always going to shift because, remember, there's a timeline associated with this. So some of the items they've moved up because of concerns of whether they'd be able to get the projects done in a timely manner within that time period. And so sometimes it's just a shifting of projects. But again, we're going to review these annually. We're going to come back quarterly and present those to the commission on where we're at. And continue to refine that as we go along.
When do you anticipate us talking about the nonprofit section?
Well, we have that is within the plan. Okay, so we can discuss that whenever you want. We can discuss it on Tuesday. The idea is that we set up the nonprofit piece, and then we're going to have a process to evaluate those types of applications. And the way we broke that down is to do something first, and then kind of do a lessons learned from what type of projects we got in, and then we can make adjustments whether we want to do that on the second round or not.
Which attachment on the Granicus goes through the nonprofit section? Because I was reading through it and I did not see that pulled out.
Do you know, Chris?
I mean, it was in the 18 million, but
Correct.
I'm talking more about if we had talked about the process for how we were going to allocate that 18 million.
Yeah, the project itself is in, just as you say, the process is not lined out in the plan. We are working with all the nonprofits. We're actually polling them right now to see what they're thinking. We don't have that information back yet.
Okay, that's where I was. Yeah, that's where I was going for the next layer of the conversation of when we would be doing that. Commissioner Gerard?
Chris, when you say all the nonprofits, what does that mean?
It's a good question. It was about 700, so all is a strong word, but it
That's
was a
pretty good.
lot, yes.
All right.
Commissioner Eggers? Microphone.
Thank you. You talked about the nonprofit, so that's good. I noticed that there's a piece about the CAM, our Coordinated Access Model. There's a piece about Sheriff's Mental Health Squad. There's a piece about, well, no, the other question was, I'm meeting with a chief this afternoon. I'm not sure what the topic is going to be, the issue, but there was an article in the last 3 weeks that came out that talked about first responders having a lot of I guess, emotional issues that they're dealing with because of the last year or two, whether it's the paramedics, whether it's police, whether it's firefighters. I think it was specifically talking about firefighters. I don't know who's thinking along those lines, if there's an avenue or some money set aside that we can augment or help that process. Again, there may be parts that they're each dealing with. I just wanted to collectively see if there's something that we might be able to help out on through these funds, even if it's on a temporary basis. So
we did consider a lot of different requests, and certainly fire departments were one of those. We opted not. That's not part of our recommendations, and that because those are operational issues day to day, and I think that they need to incorporate those within their operating budgets. So for instance, like on the mental health side of the sheriff's office, it's really a funding issue. We're using some of these funds, but we've earmarked and set aside dollars to where we can continue those programs in the future. So we didn't do anything that was a short-term type operational thing. We were trying to go to capital. But on a couple of those, we're not funding the program that way. We're funding it out of the general fund, the sheriff's mental health squad, okay? But we're using these dollars to start up the program. And then we have set aside capacity to continue that on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and I get that, but what's happened the last 2 years and what those folks have been going through, those aren't normal operating procedures, so that's why I was asking the question. And it wouldn't be necessary, it's kind of and I don't know the terms, so I'm just throwing the terms that, PTSD or whatever they've gone through and what they're dealing with. So as long as they're getting the help that they need and we don't think that there's a short-term role for us, fine. But I just want to make sure that we've at least looked at that and make sure that we are getting the care, or at least to the extent that we can help.
I don't know what the individual needs are. We didn't open it up to all the fire departments because some are municipal, some are independent fire districts. The municipalities get their own funding, so we didn't open it up because when we opened the door, there's so many needs and so many different types of requests, and from a management standpoint, it was very difficult.
Well, I think you just said it, Barry, that some of those places are within cities and they have their own ARPA funds. There are some of these fire departments that are within the unincorporated, and maybe we should look at them a little differently. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I know that they're all independent, quote, independent groups, but
They
they're
do,
still
and they have their
within.
own operating funds. And so from like a standpoint of the sheriff's office, we're taking care of the sheriff's mental health needs or those types of issues operationally. When we open it up to say, what other needs are out there, that's a pretty wide door, and it's very hard to manage and report that. And so, again, I'm not saying that the need isn't there. I just think that, that ARPA funds isn't the best way to address those.
Okay, well, we might respectfully disagree on that, because I think these ARPA funds are based a lot of things that we've gone through the last 2 years. There's other things too, and I just think we got to make sure that even if it's the areas that don't get that funding from cities, and again, I don't know what we're going to talk about today, but I'll let you know what I find out. But
Okay.
Yeah, so thank
Be
you.
happy to talk individually about any of these.
Thank you.
And it would also be for organizations to come to us if they have a need as well, to initiate that request as well.
Yep.
But
700 nonprofits, I'm surprised I haven't gotten more emails.
and that is the difficulty. There's so many different types of operational needs, and the biggest concern with the ARPA funds is the reporting requirement too, because it's not just that you have to do that; you have to have the infrastructure to get the reporting, and all that work done and reported back through the federal government in the way in which the act requires. So it becomes very, very difficult, and when you open this up administratively to manage it. Item 31 is change order to Keystone Contractors for Lakeshore Estates. I'm going to ask Jill to come up and talk about this. This is a very complicated project, and we ran into a lot of bad soils and other things, and so I'll just ask her to cover this project in more detail.
Good morning, everyone. Jill Silverboard. Thank you, Barry. So this change order relates to Phase 2 of our Lakeshore Estates projects. We've completed Phase 1 and what we may refer to as sort of a Phase 1A, excuse me. We had to remove one street from the original Phase 1 project. We had a lot of performance issues. Y'all might remember you approved a change order for that one as well. I actually have a map that's not in your backup. If they can just pop it up there, maybe it'll help. So Phase 1 are those in yellow that you see. The yellow that's the cursor's on right now, that's the street that got removed. Phase 2 is in green. You see a couple of those fingers. And then Phase 3 is in orange, which is currently under construction now. And then Phase 4. Phase 3 and 4 are attached, obviously, to the overall project, but are not part of this change order contract. So Phase 2 is requiring a change order because we discovered some really interesting conditions underneath all of these roadways. These roadways were not built by the county. This was a private development, and we, at some point in the past, took over maintenance responsibility, inherited them, and this is our first project to try to go in and correct roadway conditions and drainage. Because at the time this was built, drainage obviously wasn't the same significance that it is today in terms of our properties, particularly on fingers like this. So the change order actually does two things. It is going to address the corrections that are required to fix what we found underneath the roadways. I mean, we found entire cypress trees when we pulled up the existing roadways. The original contract anticipated that there was a shell base that we could simply reuse, and so that's not going to be true. We're going to now have to use gravel, and we've had to completely redesign how we're going to reconstruct these roadways at those locations where there's just voids. I mean, the good news is they were cypress, so the tree was still there. You know, had it been some other type of tree that had deteriorated, you would have had, sinkholes in the roadway or drops in the roadway in the past. So that is a big part of the change order. We've got a change now, and we're deducting the shell and we're adding the gravel. There's also a great deal of utility work that has been done out here. I'll start with water and sewer because it's the easiest, but our pre-construction inspections revealed some additional work to line some of the existing septic sewer lines. We also found that the water lines were only about 4 inches below, I think it was about 4 inches below the pavement. So we've had to go in and add shock absorbers between some of those areas, and then in some of the areas we had to correct the alignment of the water mains for fire protection purposes. So there's a fire protection component that's being addressed as part of Lakeshore Estates Phase 2 as well. So the complaint that we've had relative to this project, I want to try to get to really quickly, and I apologize for the yellow, green, orange, blue. That's all part of Phase 2. I was trying to identify which things we'd already finished. So yellow's done, green is done, and then orange is what we're working on now, and blue is yet to come. It's supposed to start a little later this year. So Phase 1 is actually is a completely different set of roads in the neighborhood.
So this all is Phase 2. The phases on the left really aren't phases as far as the contract is concerned.
That's correct. As I wanted to make sure, I don't think I was clear about that, and so it probably gave you the idea that there are 4 phases to this project. Thank heavens there aren't.
Well,
There's Lakeshore Estates Phase 1 that's completely finished, and then this, which has 4 sub-phases.
Yeah, when I first looked at it, I thought that it was done, and then we're having to go back after we were done.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but the part I was going to share with you next that's, I think, a concern that you may have heard, some of you may have heard, is that we are replacing what is there with like, okay? So on the yellow fingers out there where, I don't know what the name of that one is, Canal or, hang on, I'll tell you. Lakeshore Drive North,
And
the T.
please remind folks where this is exactly.
I'm sorry, this is up in the Lake Tarpon area. And the neighborhood, I think, is fairly well known by the name, but there are multiple Lakeshore Estates areas. So this is North County. So if you look at the T for Lakeshore Drive North and then the other area we completed in yellow out there, the original construction included curb and gutter and piped drainage. The other portions, such as Lakeshore Drive for the blue that we haven't gotten to yet, were not constructed that way. They were constructed with a swell system, culverted driveways, and a swell system. This project was designed to replace like improvements with like improvements. So within the same neighborhood, some property owners have curb and gutter and others do not. However, we are making significant improvements over what the current conditions are because this is the first time they've really been touched, that we've had a big project. So I know on Lakeshore Drive, for example, the swell areas will be regraded, resodded, all new culverts, driveway aprons, and it's, I think if you looked at the current conditions out there in the field, I would hope that you could agree, whether the property owners agree with us or not, that's how we designed it. If you want to put all of the drainage infrastructure underground, then that's going to be a lot more money and a completely separate project. We're not currently permitted to do that. This project is permitted to anticipate that the surface drainage systems that exist in portions of the neighborhood, as well as the new pipe drainage systems. Why that decision was made, I don't know, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
So Jill's actually taken two issues at once. So the first piece is the change order. The change order is a result of subsurface conditions. My question is, okay, why didn't we know that, when we did the core samples? I'm sure your question too. Why didn't we anticipate this? They did core samples, but obviously not enough and not in the right areas. They literally took core samples in one area and you found the base, and the area that they didn't, there's trees. And so I asked that same question.
Yeah.
That is a construction management issue. We shouldn't have change orders like this, and so we're addressing that internally. However, that's the conditions that we found.
And Barry, in phase one, the original phase, did we have this same issue?
Not exactly, but we did have issues. They weren't quite this severe.
Not to the extent. And I
They
did
weren't
see
this
the
severe.
pictures on this. I mean, you got entire roadways where there's just whole trees coming out of the
Which
ground.
makes you wondering about, like you were just saying, our testing.
Why didn't we know that?
How did we not see that,
Yep.
anticipate the project?
And we had to, show the administrator where all the borings were taken, because it was a surprise to us and the contractor. You actually have some of the photographs in your backup for this item with the big cypress trees. We missed it. As Barry mentioned, though, we actually are in a much better pre-construction QA/QC process that's been implemented since Barry joined the county, and hopefully that's going to serve us better so that we're not as surprised. We're going to run into surprises, but in this case, this was not something that was reflected in the pre-construction inspection work.
So that's a change order. The other piece that she was discussing is really a result of a homeowner complaining about having swales versus curb and gutter.
Yeah.
That is the background. That's the reason it was designed to be replaced as is. If we eliminate the swales, then we have to address all the stormwater. And so there'll have to be an area, there'll have to be treatment, et cetera, and stuff. So it would be starting the project over.
Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, and I'm going to speak, your point on the first phase, and we did have this issue in phase one, and, I'm really disappointed we obviously didn't do a better job of identifying, at least in terms of understanding the real cost of this project, which is a project that never seems to end, for these folks. I feel so bad for them and what they're going through. But the piece that I'm going to talk about is this phase four, that North Shore Drive, and the discussion that you're having about one homeowner having an issue. And I did go out this week. I did go out yesterday, and really wanted to thank Rhonda Bowman for meeting me out there from staff to talk about it, to bring drawings, to talk to this one owner. But if you start at the western end, or the western end, which is the left side of the screen on that blue, and moving to the east, and I'll be glad to have this conversation with you, Barry,
Sure.
one-on-one, but all of it is being taken care of on the western end with light swales. In the middle parts of it, as you see that first, second, third vertical orange there, a pipe, actually they are putting pipe in the right-of-way and having a light swale over top of it, and that water will then drain north on that orange piece. That third orange from the left, it'll go north and it'll drain that way. The piece, that last blue piece to the east, is a separate, so to speak, system. And it is a ditch, not a swale, and it is awful. I wouldn't want it in my front yard, you wouldn't want it in your front yard. And all I said, and of course, this is staff decisions, they bring them to us and all that, but it is not a swale. It is, it may be defined as one, but it is, when you have your property, and I don't know what the drop is to the bottom of the ditch, it is dangerous. And
Okay.
there's going to be a little evening out of that. I'm understanding she showed some drawings how it will even out, but the drop to the bottom is going to be even deeper. A house across the street that has probably a pipe that was put in by the owner, a previous owner, is going to be repiped. This house on this side of the street that didn't have somebody be so bold is not going to have a pipe put in. So you're going to have a home on the other side that actually looks pretty good, and your home on this side that doesn't. And I know we're getting into the weeds here a little
Well,
bit.
I have photographs if you want to see
don't
it.
wanna-
I've got pictures of exactly what you saw yesterday.
I don't think for the purposes of this item, we can certainly discuss
Yeah.
the issue.
Yeah, I would like
mean,
to do
think
that.
I think the issue was really the change order. I didn't
Yeah,
necessarily.
the item is
I
for
mean,
the change order.
The change order is on the area in the orange, is that correct?
That's correct. Well, no, it's it's orange and blue. I mean,
Okay.
it's all of the work that has not been completed, so it's the orange and blue.
Okay. And I don't disagree with you, Commissioner. What the residents have endured on this project is significant. It's not the same as the original phase and the types of issues that they're going with, but we spent a lot of time, and we actually had one of the staff members that actually designed and helped us design our portfolio management process in recently, and I didn't recognize her, otherwise I would have pointed it out. But they've really taken a lot of steps to try to improve our processes to make sure these types of things don't occur. I don't think that will ever be eliminated. I've done it before where I literally looked at the core samples, and we did all these core samples, and then they get to an area that's completely wet and completely requires a change order. I think we want to make sure that our procedures are tight. Obviously, they weren't tight enough on this one, or we wouldn't be facing a change order like this. But that is what we're facing right now.
Yeah, and again, on that piece, there's some, the whole maintenance issue of these swales is concerning. I mean, I think there's she was saying there's something about a 10-year review of this unless a resident calls in that there's a problem. But if you go like to the east of this gentleman's property that we're talking about, the swale underneath a driveway was completely closed. I mean, it wasn't like it needed some maintenance, it needed to be opened up. So
Which it will be as
well,
part
no,
of the project.
I understand that, but
I mean, that's why we're doing the project.
But the concern is that we're not maintaining it. That should have been maintained along the way. We should have been looking at, and so the concern is that when we do this open ditch and the maintenance going forward, are we going to have some of the same issues that we have now? Because the maintenance program is tough for residents to grasp and understand, and when will it be done and how will it be done? Obviously, it's not done often enough proactively. Right. It's more reactively. So anyway, that's just that little piece that was in the drawings that I looked at that was purple. That's the only area that wasn't getting a minor swale or a pipe, and it's just got these ditches that will be a little bit rounded but still deep. And we'll talk about it. And I don't want to talk about any more about that today. So
Yeah.
We inherited what's there.
The only reason I asked
And we do
her-
have a process.
I didn't want to go into great detail on that, but the only reason I brought it up is because you did receive a letter I saw yesterday regarding the issue. So I wanted to make you aware that we're aware of it, and we'll be discussing it more. But
And I think in not only in this neighborhood, but communities throughout Pinellas, we should be trying to get away from the ditch as drainage.
I agree.
Commissioner Seal?
I can tell you places in Lillman that are very deep, as well as in Seminole as well. If you wouldn't mind just sending us that map, plus also any pictures that you might have. Thank you.
And to your point, it was interesting when I was out there, another resident came along and talked about a permeable pipe. So it's a pipe you can put in that still has permeating abilities. So it's not that it just has to have grass there that permeates into the ground, which is part of the attraction of a ditch. But you have pipe in there that also allows it to move, but also permeate. So it's interesting. I didn't realize that they had that as an option, but interesting. Yeah. So who knew?
we have a few pictures. We'll certainly send them around, but you can share those while we're here. But we'll certainly send that out.
All right, moving on.
Okay, item 32 is a Fourth Amendment to a contract with HDR Engineering for the San Martin over Riviera Bay Bridge Development Environmental Study. So this contract's $54,000. Item number 33 is resolution providing authority to expand the areas of use for golf carts for unincorporated Palm Harbor. I know this has been through extensive discussion and review. Item number 34 is approval of the Pinellas County Technical Rescue Team Agreement between the county and the cities of Clearwater, Largo, Pinellas Park, and St. Petersburg. Item number 35 is Amendment 2 with Advanced Disposal Services for Solid Waste Southeast, Inc. for landfill operations at Bridgeway Acres.
I plan to discuss this on Tuesday.
And we're going to have staff available for
Okay.
that. Item number 36 is appointments to the Technical Management Committee. So we had a person leave, and so the recommendation is Robert Mills out at Solid Waste to fill that vacancy. Item number 37 is a resolution approving issuance of multifamily housing revenue bonds for a multifamily residential housing unit for Creekside Manor.
And this is a current facility. We're purchasing it and rehabbing it. Is that
Let me see.
your understanding?
Yes, the projects include the acquisition and rehab of Kirkside Manors 1 and 2, a 92-unit senior rental housing complex located at Franklin Street in Clearwater, and 1335 Pierce Street in Clearwater. So two different groups. They're two different units, Phase 1 and Phase 2, but it's a rehab.
I think it just goes to the question that when I read it, it pops up of, and I know that we've done this a couple times where we've kind of, because some of these are so old, they need, I mean, it's
Correct.
basically needs to be a complete fresh start. But my question would be about how many of these do we, and I don't know what the specific question I really have is, but it seems like how many are we buying an existing and rehabbing? That doesn't create any real new units necessarily, and that's where I'm starting to wonder about it.
It's preserving units,
And I get- I mean-
and these are federal tax credits. So, but to your point, we can ask her to kind of outline and give you kind of an overview, because you get these one by one.
Right.
And maybe we can get an overall report for Tuesday that would give you some sense of what we see over a year or 5 years or something
Perfect.
like that.
Perfect.
So I'll ask Stella to reach out and have that available for you on Tuesday. Item 38 is resolution approving multifamily housing revenue bonds. This is for Clear Bay Terrace, multifamily housing residential unit.
Under item number 39, this is a proposed settlement. This is a confidential matter that I will reach out to each of you prior to Tuesday to discuss and answer any questions you may have. And currently, I have nothing planned under item number 40.
A question for Jewel.
All right.
Jewel, on the work that we did on the redistricting last month, is that the final step, or does it still go up to the state for approval?
The state does not approve the action that you take here locally on your county commission districts. The only subsequent follow-up action that occurs after you all take action are we are working with the clerk to ensure that we are meeting the advertising requirements, and you will at some point, probably I would guess maybe at your second meeting in January, see the confirmation of compliance with those advertising requirements placed into your minutes.
Okay, but there's no other additional action on our part, and there's no other level of government that has to approve what we,
That is absolutely correct.
thank you.
Item 41 is County Administrator's Report. I'll have something for Tuesday, and then the commission has an appointment to the Palm Harbor Community Services Agency by Commissioner Justice.
Item 43, County Commission new business. I've been informed that Mayor-elect, for another half hour, Mayor-elect Welch will be appointing himself to serve as the City of St. Petersburg representative for the Tourist Development Council. We'll need to approve that on Tuesday. So set aside another half hour for discussion and debate on if you want to do that. Anybody else have anything else for new business for Tuesday that we don't have already?
Not that I've thought of yet.
Anything else, Mr. Administrator? All right. Thank you very much. We will see you Tuesday. We are adjourned.